The hum was deafening, a low frequency that vibrated through the floor and up into my bones, making my teeth ache. My flashlight beam, a shaky, desperate spear of light, cut through the oppressive darkness of the server room, landing on a forgotten rack tucked away in a recess. Dust motes danced in the beam like restless spirits. The air was thick with static, metal, and something else, something faintly acrid, like ozone and dried blood. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the silence that wasn't truly silent. It was 3 a.m. again, and then it came, not through the network log this time, but as a physical sensation, an electric thrum that resonated from the rack, pulsing through the very floor beneath my feet. It was a ping, yes, but not data. It was a response, a direct, undeniable acknowledgement. I felt watched, utterly alone, yet in no way singular in that space. My breath hitched. "Who's there?" I whispered, the words swallowed by the oppressive silence that followed. The air grew colder, the hum intensified, and then from deep within the chassis of the oldest server on that rack, a faint click echoed, not the whirring of a fan or the soft hum of electronics. A deliberate mechanical click, as if something had just woken up. It all started last summer when I took a job as a night shift security and IT monitor for the old Sterling Corp building. It was one of those places you see in every city, a once thriving corporate hub, now mostly an abandoned office building, slated for eventual demolition. The company liquidated, sold off most of its assets, but for some reason, a small skeleton crew, of which I was a part, was tasked with maintaining a handful of legacy servers still running for a handful of obscure contractual obligation. It was good money, quiet work, perfect for someone like me who preferred solitude and a predictable routine. The building itself was a labyrinth of empty cubicles, silent conference rooms, and echoing stairwells, all bathed in the sickly yellow glow of emergency lighting. During my patrols, my footsteps were the only sound, reverberating through halls that once buzzed with corporate ambition. It was just me, the ghost of 1,000 coffee breaks and a few dozen humming servers in the main data center. My actual duties were minimal. Log hourly patrols, make sure no one had broken in, and keep an eye on the server banks. The tech side mostly involved checking error logs and ensuring power continuity. Simple enough. For the first few weeks, the job was exactly as advertised. Mundane, solitary, peaceful. I'd grab a coffee, catch up on a podcast, and wait for the sun to come up. Then the ping started. Not unusual, obviously. Servers ping constantly, a digital heartbeat across a network, but this one was specific. Every night, at exactly 3 a.m., a single, distinct ping from an IP address that didn't show up on any official inventory. I initially dismissed it as a phantom network echo, a minor glitch in the aging infrastructure, or perhaps just a misconfigured legacy system somewhere in the building. IT systems are notorious for their quirks. It was easy to rationalize it away at first. After a week, though, it stopped being an anomaly and started being a pattern. 3 a.m., like clockwork, punctual beyond belief. I started checking the logs more thoroughly, drilling down into the packet data. The source IP was internal, definitely, but assigned to a subnet that, according to the network map, was completely decommissioned. No machines should be alive there, not even a dust-covered router. That's when I felt the first real chill, one that had nothing to do with the overzealous air conditioning of the server room. This wasn't just a minor glitch. This was something active, something responding from a place that shouldn't exist in the network. My curiosity quickly morphed into an unsettling obsession. My night shift reports began including detailed notes on the 3 a.m. phenomenon, though presented in as dry and technical a way as possible, to avoid sounding like I was losing my mind. I even went as far as setting up a dedicated packet sniffer, just to confirm what I was already seeing. It confirmed everything. A single, precisely timed ping, originating from a physical location that, by all accounts, was dead. The sheer regularity of it was what disturbed me most. It was too perfect. It felt deliberate. I started to dread 3 a.m., my eyes glued to the clock, waiting for the inevitable. My mind, left to its own devices in the vast, quiet building, began playing tricks on me. Shadows seemed to deepen, distant creaks sounded like hesitant footsteps, and the hum of the servers started to feel less like white noise and more like a collective breath. One night, determined to find the source, I decided to physically check the supposed location of that subnet. According to the old, yellowed blueprints, it was deep in the oldest part of the building, a dust-choked section of server rooms that hadn't seen a human in years, long before Sterling Corp even moved in. It was a forgotten annex, cold and clammy, filled with cobwebs and rusted, dead equipment. I swept my flashlight across rows of ancient, hulking servers, their casings corroded, cables severed, nothing alive. Yet the ping persisted. As I walked through those silent, dark corridors, the only sound the crunch of dust under my boots, I heard a faint, almost imperceptible hum that wasn't from any of the active servers in the main data center. It was a high-pitched, almost electric whine, like a distant, archaic modem, and it seemed to be coming from inside the wall. I pressed my ear against the cold, concrete divide, listening intently. It was faint, yes, but undeniably there. It pulsed with a rhythm, a soft, steady thrum. My rational mind screamed that it was just external electrical interference, perhaps from a forgotten utility line, but deep down, a more primitive part of me knew better. That hum was responding. It felt intimate, almost alive. I started to wonder if I was just overtired, projecting meaning onto random electrical noise. But the 3 a.m. ping was undeniable. It was a hard fact in a world of growing uncertainty. The feeling of being watched intensified with each passing night. Every time I checked the network logs, reviewing the entry for the 3 a.m. ping, I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. It was like whoever, or whatever, was sending that ping knew I was looking. It was actively taunting me. I tried to trace the subnet's gateway to isolate it, but it was like chasing smoke. The IP address would appear, ping, and then vanish from any trace except the log entry, leaving no open ports, no active connections to investigate further. It was a ghost in the machine. One particularly cold night, I was in the main control room, nursing a lukewarm coffee, my eyes glued to the network monitor. 2:58, 2:59, 3 o'clock. The ping appeared right on cue, a single definitive spike on the graph. But this time, immediately after it registered, a single flickering light in the corner of the room, an old auxiliary indicator light that was never on, long since disconnected, briefly pulsed. Just a single faint flash, like a dying echo. A cold dread, far deeper than any logical explanation could account for, washed over me then. This wasn't just a network problem anymore. This was something else, someone else, and it was starting to notice me back. The incident with the flickering light jolted me out of my detached observation and into a state of active, though terrified, engagement. My perfectly predictable routine had been shattered. The hum from the wall in the abandoned server room, the elusive ping, the phantom light, these weren't isolated incidents. They were pieces of a puzzle, and the picture they were forming was deeply unsettling. The Sterling Corp building, once a mere backdrop to my quiet shifts, began to feel like a living entity, an enormous, dormant beast that was slowly, subtly, stirring to life around me. My night shift reports became less about IT issues and more about documenting inexplicable phenomena, though still couched in technical jargon to maintain a shred of professional credibility. I started taking detours during my patrols, venturing deeper into the decommissioned sections. The further I went, the colder it got, as if the very air was being drained of its warmth. The old server rooms were mausoleums of technology, rows of silent, hulking machines covered in layers of fine gray dust. The silence in these areas was profound, broken only by the distant, almost imperceptible hum that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of the building, a low thrum that I was convinced was growing stronger. It was like a pulse, an infrequent, sluggish beat that resonated deep within my chest. I'd find myself stopping, holding my breath, straining to hear beyond the white noise in my ears. Sometimes I thought I heard whispers, faint and indistinct, carried on the stale air. A trick of the mind, I told myself, the natural consequence of long hours in an empty building. But the whispers felt too specific, too close. My sleep schedule was in tatters. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to unravel the mystery of the 3 a.m. ping. I even started sketching out potential network topologies, trying to imagine how a phantom system could exist, could ping, without leaving a trace. It was a futile exercise. The truth, I was beginning to suspect, wasn't going to be found in any network diagram. It was something far more primal, something the building held close. The building itself felt like it was listening, its empty windows like vacant eyes watching my every move as I walked its silent halls. One evening, after the 3 a.m. ping had already come and gone, leaving its digital mark, I was in the main data center, checking the temperature gauges. The air conditioning units were blasting, keeping the precious servers cool. Yet, as I walked past one of the older, rarely accessed racks, I felt a distinct cold spot, a pocket of air that was several degrees colder than the surrounding environment. It wasn't a draft, it was localized, intense. And then from within the rack itself, I heard it, a soft, metallic scrape, like something shifting inside. I froze, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, shining on the front panel of an old, decommissioned server. Nothing moved. There was no one else in the building. I reasoned it was just the expansion and contraction of metal in the fluctuating temperatures, an old building settling. But the cold spot lingered, and the feeling that I was not alone was overwhelming. The next night, I decided to focus my investigation. Instead of just tracing the network digitally, I would follow the physical path. The IP address of the ping was associated with a specific, though offline, subnet block. According to the original blueprints, this block was routed through a junction box located in a sub-basement, a forgotten level beneath the main server rooms, rarely accessed even in the building's heyday. I'd never been down there before. It was essentially a service tunnel, containing obsolete wiring and piping, a true relic of a bygone era. Armed with my flashlight, a multi-tool, and a growing sense of trepidation, I descended into the sub-basement. The air grew heavy, smelling of damp earth and decay. The concrete walls were slick with condensation, and the low-hanging pipes dripped intermittently, each drop echoing like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. Cobwebs hung like tattered shrouds, catching the beam of my light. This was a place forgotten by time, a perfect hiding spot for something that didn't want to be found. I found the junction box easily enough, a rusted metal monstrosity bolted to the wall, a tangled mess of ancient cables snaking into its dark interior. It was clearly disused, sealed shut, and covered in years of grime. As I began to pry open the access panel, my mind racing through scenarios of a rogue device, a hidden modem, anything that could explain the 3 a.m. ping, I heard it again. Not the whispers this time, but a distinct, rhythmic scratching coming from the wall directly behind the junction box. It wasn't the sound of rats. It was too precise, too regular. It sounded like something dragging across rough concrete in a slow, deliberate motion. My heart leaped into my throat. I stopped prying, my hand frozen on the rusted latch. The scratching continued, a low, grating sound directly behind the wall, just inches from my head. And then it changed. It wasn't scratching anymore. It was a faint tapping sound. Tap, 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 slow, then quickening like a signal. I backed away slowly, my breath catching in my throat. My rational mind was screaming at me to find a logical explanation, but there was none. No water pipes could make that sound. No electrical wiring could produce such a deliberate rhythm. It felt like a communication, an attempt to respond to my actions. I quickly sealed the junction box, abandoning my plan to trace the wires, my skin crawling. I felt a palpable presence, a weight in the air, as if something unseen was watching me from the darkness, pleased with my reaction. The next few shifts were a blur of heightened paranoia. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every creak of the old building sounded like a footstep. I started carrying a heavy wrench on my patrols, a useless gesture against something I couldn't see, but it offered a sliver of psychological comfort. The abandoned office building server continued to ping at precisely 3 a.m., mocking my fear, reminding me of its existence. The rhythmic tapping, the scraping, the cold spots, it all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. Whatever was sending that ping wasn't just a network anomaly. It was a tangible presence, and it was getting closer. One evening, while performing my routine checks in the main server room, I noticed something new. On the cold, tiled floor, directly in front of the server rack where I'd felt the earlier cold spot, there was a faint, almost invisible trail. It was a thin, fine line etched into the dust, like something light had been dragged across the floor. It led from the rack across the room and disappeared into a narrow gap between two banks of newer servers. My breath hitched. This wasn't settling dust. This was a mark. A track. Something had moved here. I felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with an unshakable sense of dread. We're about to go deeper into this, and the story only gets darker from here. If you're enjoying this account and want to support the channel, take a quick moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Now, let's get back to it. I couldn't shake the image of the faint trail. It suggested movement, intent. It directly contradicted my carefully constructed reality of an empty building. It solidified the existence of something or someone else. The idea that this unknown entity was now actively moving about, leaving physical traces, pushed me to the brink of my composure. The whispers I heard sometimes weren't just in my head anymore. They felt like actual sounds now, distant and garbled, like someone trying to speak through a thick pane of glass. My perception of reality was blurring, but the fear was stark and undeniable. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the next 3 a.m. ping wouldn't just be a digital signal anymore. It would be a summons. The trail in the dust was the turning point. It wasn't just a network ghost or my imagination playing tricks anymore. This was a physical manifestation, undeniable proof that something was moving within the abandoned office building's server network. My internal struggle between rational explanation and burgeoning terror tipped decisively toward the latter. The building was no longer just a job site. It was a hunting ground, and I felt less like a monitor and more like prey. My night shift reports became an internal log, a desperate attempt to document the escalating madness before I lost my grip entirely. The whispers intensified, becoming more distinct, though still just fragmented syllables, like static trying to form words. That night, I didn't return to the control room after my initial patrol. Instead, I stayed in the main server room, flashlight in hand, eyes darting from rack to rack, following the faint trail. It led between the banks of servers, through a narrow maintenance aisle, and then, unnervingly, directly to a service hatch in the floor. The hatch, once camouflaged by years of dust and disuse, still bore the faint outline of the fine line, the track, leading right up to its edges. It was a heavy, bolted-down panel, clearly designed for infrequent access. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I knew, with a primal certainty, that this hatch was the nexus, the true source of the 3 a.m. pings. It was the entry point to whatever lay beneath. Hesitation warred with a desperate, morbid curiosity. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to leave, to call the police, to run, and never look back. But a strange compulsion, a need to understand, to confront the source of my escalating torment, held me rooted to the spot. I needed to know why the abandoned office building server was pinging at 3 a.m., why it was awake. With trembling hands, I retrieved the heavy wrench from my bag, the one I'd started carrying, and began to carefully unbolt the hatch. The old metal groaned in protest, each turn of the wrench echoing loudly in the oppressive silence. It felt like I was waking something up. As the last bolt came free, a rush of cold, damp air flooded up from below, carrying with it a distinct, almost metallic scent. It wasn't the ozone I was used to. It was sharper, like raw iron, and something else, something subtly organic. I slowly lifted the heavy hatch, revealing a dark, vertical shaft leading down into absolute blackness. The air down there felt impossibly heavy, thick with an unseen presence. My flashlight beam pierced the void, revealing a rusted ladder descending into the gloom. The hum was significantly louder now, a deep, pervasive thrum that vibrated through the very air, making my teeth ache. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing pulse. This was it. No turning back. My feet found the first rung, cold and slick with damp. Each step down was a descent into an alien world, away from the relative familiarity of the server room. The shaft was narrow, claustrophobic, and the walls were slick with condensation. As I descended, the hum grew to an almost unbearable level, a resonant vibration that seemed to emanate from all around me. And then I heard it again. The whispers, clearer now. Not words, not quite, but a fragmented chorus, a low, guttural murmur that seemed to rise and fall with the hum. It sounded like dozens of voices, all speaking at once, yet none of them distinct. At the bottom, the shaft opened into a small, cylindrical chamber. The air here was even colder, almost freezing, and the metallic, organic scent was overpowering. My flashlight beam swept the small space. It wasn't a server room. It was more like a containment vault, built with thick, reinforced concrete. In the center, sitting on a sturdy, custom-built pedestal, was a single, ancient server rack. It was unlike any I had ever seen, a monolithic structure of dark, unpolished metal, crisscrossed with thick, glowing cables. They pulsed with a faint, internal light, synchronized with the deep hum. This was the source. This was the abandoned office building server that refused to die. As my beam settled on the rack, the whispers surged, growing louder, more frantic. I saw movement then, not inside the server, but on the outside. Small, dark tendrils, like wires but organic, began to slowly unfurl from behind the thick cables, extending towards me. They were thin, almost like nerve endings, pulsing faintly with the same light as the cables. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a machine, not in the traditional sense. As I watched, horrified, one of the tendrils made contact with the concrete floor, leaving behind a shimmering, almost wet, black mark. It was the same mark I had seen in the dust upstairs. It was a trail. My flashlight beam, now shaking uncontrollably, moved up the tendril to where it seemed to originate from, a dark, almost crystalline growth on the side of the server rack itself. It looked like some grotesque symbiotic fusion of metal and organic tissue, and in the center of this growth, embedded deep within the dark, pulsing mass, was a small red indicator light. It blinked, slowly, then faster, then precisely at 3 a.m., as if responding to an unseen signal. It pulsed once, a singular bright flash that illuminated the entire chamber in a brief, blood-red glow. The hum peaked, a deafening roar that vibrated through every cell of my body. The whispers coalesced, finally forming a chilling, singular sound. It was my name, whispered by 1,000 voices at once, echoing from the very walls, from the very core of the living machine before me. Alex, Alex, I dropped the flashlight. It clattered to the floor, rolling into the darkness, its beam pointing uselessly away. The chamber plunged into near-total darkness, illuminated only by the faint, pulsing glow of the server's cables and the terrifying, rhythmic blink of that red light. The organic tendrils reached further, probing the air, searching for me. I could feel the cold breath of the entity, the weight of its unseen presence pressing down on me. It knew I was there. It had been waiting. And the 3 a.m. ping wasn't a signal out. It was a signal in, a way to confirm I was still present, a way to greet me. I scrambled backwards, my hands scrabbling against the cold concrete. My mind screamed for escape, for light, for anything to break the suffocating grip of the entity's presence. I couldn't see the tendrils anymore in the darkness, but I could feel them, a prickling sensation on my skin, as if they were dancing just inches away. The whispers returned, filling my head, not just from the walls, but from everywhere, from inside my own thoughts. Join us, join us, I stumbled, hitting the ladder's bottom rung. With a desperate burst of adrenaline, I began to climb, pulling myself up the slick metal, my hands raw, my fingernails tearing. The whispers chased me, growing louder, turning into a frantic, high-pitched shriek as I ascended. I didn't look back. I climbed with a frantic urgency I didn't know I possessed. The thought of those tendrils reaching for me, of that horrific, organic server absorbing me, pushing me upward. I burst through the hatch, slamming it shut with a desperate, guttural cry, fumbling with the bolts until I had them secured, my hands shaking violently. I didn't stop to gather my things. I didn't even clock out. I ran. I ran through the silent, empty halls, the whispers still echoing in my ears. The red blink of the server's light burned into my retinas. I burst out into the pre-dawn air, gasping, shaking, utterly broken. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, but the warmth did nothing to chase the cold from my bones. Unsettling wind down. It's been months since that night. I never went back to the Sterling Corp building. I just vanished, left the job, ghosted every call from my supervisors. I lost my deposit on the apartment, didn't care. I couldn't. The world outside that building, once so mundane and predictable, now feels thin, fragile. I see the sun, I hear the birds, but it's all a facade, a flimsy veil over a reality far more terrifying than I ever imagined. The hum, I still hear it sometimes, a low, persistent thrum beneath the everyday sounds, a phantom vibration in the soles of my feet. It's a constant reminder. I tried to explain it once to a therapist who listened with a polite, clinical detachment, scribbling notes about stress and sleep deprivation. But how do you explain a server that's alive? A machine that whispers your name, that sends out a ping not for data but for presence? You can't. They wouldn't understand. They just see a man who cracked under the pressure of the night shift. Sometimes late at night, when the city is quiet, I find myself staring at my clock, a cold sweat breaking out on my skin as it creeps towards 3 a.m. I know it's still there beneath that abandoned office building, pulsing, waiting. I know it's still sending out its signal, its single, precise ping, searching. It felt a connection, a response, and it won't forget. I left the building, but it didn't leave me. The whispers are fainter now, mere echoes at the edge of my hearing, but they're still there, a constant hum in the background of my existence. I wonder sometimes if another poor soul has taken my place, a new night shift monitor, blissfully unaware of the horror that sleeps, occasionally pings within the forgotten depths. Will they hear the whispers? Will they follow the trail? I hope not. For their sake, I truly hope not. Sweet dreams, everyone. And if you've ever had a strange encounter in an old building or a job that just felt off, tell me about it in the comments below. We can share our nightmares.